Hello, and welcome to another episode of Pardon the Dust, Dusting Off Construction with Caitlin and Jillian. We're your hosts, Caitlin
and Jillian,
and we're here dusting off the topic of entering the AEC industry with Shir, Rustici, Autodesk Expert Elite, and Global Product Manager at Symetri. So let's get to it. Shir, could you please introduce yourself?
So, hi everybody, I'm Shir. Like Caitlin just said, I'm a global product manager at Symetri as well as an Autodesk Expert Elite. So I come from like the architecture industry. I studied architecture. I worked as a BIM manager and I specialized in like BIM implementation and Dynamo for many, many years at both architecture firms and structural engineering firms, both in the US and abroad. So I actually lived in Munich, Germany for a few years and worked there, which was an amazing experience.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I came back to the US and continued doing that until I kind of transitioned into product development and became a product owner and then a product manager, which is my role now.
Very cool. And then I guess a very quick off-topic question. When you were living there, do you know German?
I did learn German. I wouldn't say I'm super fluent, but I was actually I recently did a work trip to Austria. And so I also took like a personal trip to both Austria and then Munich, Germany. And I got to, I guess you could say, quote, like flex my German a bit. I realized like once the pressure was off of like living there and like having to speak German versus like traveling and being able to just like use it conversationally or like very basic, I was like, oh, I can actually like speak it and get by. And I know more than I thought I could remember. So that was
it's
fun.
always fun being able to pass. I went to Paris several years ago and I know French, and once people just assume that you also know the language, you're like, oh, I fit in. This feels pretty cool. Don't seem like an outsider. It's very fun. So we've come up with a new question we want to ask our guests on the podcast. So I'm going to start off by asking that. The question is, do you have any pets? And if not, what would your ideal pet be?
Oh my God, yes, I'm definitely a pet person. Pets are better than people.
Absolutely.
But I have a dog. Her name is Yaya. She is a mix, so she's a mutt. So I adopted her at the height of the pandemic, like right when they told us that we were going fully remote. I was like, perfect, this is my opportunity. I'm going to get a dog. I also needed her because I was going through like a bit of a personal situation and I needed like that emotional support. Turns out that she needs more emotional support than me, but that's beyond the point. She's like a shepherd mix and I love her to death. I would get more dogs if I could, but one dog is already a lot of work.
Yes, they absolutely are, but they're so adorable and so worth it all.
Yeah, and I do love pandemic pets. I feel like they're a special kind of needy. That's particularly nice. My pandemic pet Maple is a wonderful example of that.
Yeah.
So could you give us a little bit, I know you kind of explained what you do. Could you just kind of elaborate a little bit more about your current role at Symetri?
Yeah. So as a product manager, and a lot of people kind of, and this is different in different companies a lot of the times, but at Symetri, a product manager is the person that is managing either one or multiple products and is the communication between the customers, our leadership, and the development team. So I work and I go to like different conferences, go to different meetups, have meetings with our customer base, and try to discuss what problems they're having, how we can resolve that, and then how we can actually turn that into features that will help to solve those problems. We also talk about improvements to our existing features, so trying to figure out how much development time we're going to use on feature improvements, on bug fixes, versus on research to developing new features and new functionality. And of course, in this day and age, how we're going to incorporate AI into our products, things like that. And then work with our product owners who are managing the actual developers to kind of make all those dreams and ideas come to life.
Makes sense. So that would be Jillian's role, product owner.
Very similar to my role. Obviously, at a larger company, you have, a more hierarchical.
You have a
bigger
hierarchy.
hierarchy of that product team, but very similar to my own role. So I guess my question is, what kinds of customers are you working with? Like, what does your customer base look like? Is that construction? Is it architecture?
Yeah, so mostly we're working with the designers on both either just specifically architecture firms or multidisciplinary firms. Because the products that we offer span multiple disciplinaries or multiple disciplines, I guess you can say, we one of our biggest customer bases are firms that are multidisciplinary, meaning they have architecture, they have structural engineering, they have mechanical engineering, and some of them are also design build, so including, construction as well in there. But our construction team at Symetri, we do have a construction team. They work a lot with our other products that I don't manage, so I don't specifically work with them, but we do cross collaborate a lot of the times with the product managers on managing those products as well as our construction team themselves.
Nice, cool. And I wanted to make sure our listeners understood the term of AEC. Do you think you could just familiarize everybody with what AEC is?
Yeah, so AEC, or it's also even expands to AECO, but AEC is the acronym for architecture, engineering, and construction. And if you tap on that O, it's also owners. So it's kind of like the full life cycle within the building, design, and construction industry.
Nice, awesome. And you mentioned your Autodesk Expert Elite. So I know that's a completely separate thing than my question I'm about to ask. My question's going to be how to utilize Autodesk, and then we can get into what Autodesk Expert Elite means.
So I started using Autodesk software back when I was in school, in architecture school. I went to Pratt Institute, and
nice.
They are a very, there's a lot of architecture school that are very focused on like the technical, and a lot of architecture schools that are focused on the design. And Pratt was a design school, so they wanted us, like, our first year of school was mostly all hand drawing. They wanted to teach us like the art of hand drawing and how to think through, from mind to like hand to paper, which I think is very crucial in learning how to design, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But as me being me, I'm always looking for how to be more efficient, how to be faster, how to get things done, because I just don't like to. I'm just like always running 1,000 miles an hour. And so I remember I heard of AutoCAD. I hadn't learned how to use it yet, but our upperclassmen, were using it, and I basically approached an upperclassman that I became friends with. I was like, I need you to teach me this overnight because I have a deadline. And as you know, architecture school, it's like every night is a deadline and every overnighter. And, and I was like, I don't want to pull overnighters anymore. I need you to teach me AutoCAD so I could get this done faster. And I basically learned it in one night. And my next project was done in it. And it basically, that like sparked my desire to continue to learn different software, which then obviously I learned Revit, started working in the industry, and then, transitioned to, well, now Revit isn't fast enough, learning Dynamo to automate things in Revit. And then as Autodesk has, produced more products like BIM 360, ACC, and Forma, as well as, when we're thinking about full life cycle, I haven't started using these products yet, but I've started looking into them, which is like Tandem, which is PLM and things like that. So it's just all consuming in my life of my work life.
I get that.
Not my personal life.
Well, that's good. No more all-nighters.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had another spin-off question for you. So you said you went to Pratt, and then you kind of talked about, the difference. There's kind of like two different architecture schools. I had gone to school for industrial design, so semi-similar. And, either you can go to school where it's more technical, or you can go to a more art-driven school. And that's where I went. I went to a more art-driven school. So I wanted to hear about your experience with meeting people that did go to a technical architecture school versus more the, artsy architecture schools.
Yeah, so I think the people who went to more technical schools, they really understand a lot more about like the building construction,
Yeah.
how to detail things correctly, how different materials work. And, I think they potentially are more prepared for like taking the exams and things like that. Whereas, and I only know that from speaking to other people. I don't know that from experience because
Right.
like I said, I didn't go to that technical school, but I think there's a lot of that technical knowledge that is really important. That a lot of people will just kind of write off and say, oh, well, you'll learn that in the field or you'll learn that when you're studying or whatever. But I think there is room, and it's really important if you are making buildings to understand how those details come together. Whereas the school that I went to was really focused on the conceptual.
Yeah.
It was
Mm.
very conceptual. So it was all about, the design and how your building and how your space is going to make the person experiencing that space feel. How do the materials drive emotion? How do the size and the proportions mitigate, the feeling of that space and things like that, which I think is extremely valid in and of its own. Of course, like in the end of the day, architects are really focused on evoking emotion, creating spaces that drive how you feel within that space, whether we're trying to make you feel calm, because you're trying to relax versus having a space that makes you, more energetic, like let's say, a gym or whatever, where you're trying to like give that high energy versus like a yoga studio where you're like trying to
Yeah.
be, very relaxed. I'm sorry that those were both like exercises based design,
But
but
I think it's a great comparison.
Yeah.
so I think both, and I wish there was more combination. Like I did
I
have
agree.
some technical classes, but at least in my school, like that wasn't the focus. So, but I'm always on the side of like a university should teach you critical thinking skills. And I think learning that conceptual side really honed in those critical thinking skills and analyzing skills of what you're doing and how it's being perceived by the people you're designing for.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think it's a good way to blend an actual, let's just say architecture agency where you kind of got people from both types of schools so you can kind of work together and collaborate. But I do agree with having gone to a not technical industrial design school. I wish I knew more of the actual, work that goes into the engineering aspect. I considered going into engineering after school just to get myself there. I did
Me
not get there.
too.
Yeah, right. I'm like, maybe I just need to go to another school and do engineering, and then I'll feel
Yeah.
fully rounded. But here I am in marketing, and everything I learned in school translates very well in many ways. So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess kind of thinking about that, if you can learn more technically the engineering skills, the numbers, the, design element in that path, but also you can learn these critical thinking, the creativity, the emotion it evokes. Do you feel like that might have even set you up for more success given all the automation and AI and tools that are available now?
I always wonder that because I went to such a design school, but then I ended up going on such the technical route
Yeah.
that, but I feel like a lot of my peers at my school went the same path. And I feel that they are very similar because when you're talking about technology or like product management or all those things, it is designing in a sense and it is
Yeah.
problem solving. And that's what they're teaching us in school. They're teaching us how to problem solve different scenarios, how to design for different people. And as a product manager, that's what I'm doing. I'm creating personas and I'm creating features that are specific to those different people. So I think a lot of the things that I did learn in school translated really well to what I'm doing now. So people like always ask like how I got from point A to point B, and there is a line that can be drawn in it, and hopefully we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of our questions for later, but I just want to ask, I guess, dwell on this a little bit longer. As I'm also in the product management world as a product owner, and I come from a very technical background of physics and math. And I find that the skills that I need to work on and I need to grow are those creative thinking skills. How can I personally connect with someone? How can I make sure that they're feeling like this is solving their problem instead of just factually 1, 2, 3, it solves your problem? And I feel like the advantage that you have absolutely indicates that people from that creative side, that critical thinking side, can come into the technical world, because technical skills, at least in my experience, are far easier to learn than how do I be emotionally comfortable with this idea and have other people become emotionally comfortable with it as well. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Spinning back to Autodesk, could you tell us more about being an Autodesk Expert Elite and what that means?
Yeah, so I've heard this term for a while now since, I kind of became, or working with Autodesk products, attending conferences. I always heard this like expert elite term, and I always kind of thought, it's unattainable, I guess you could say that, it really is people that are the most technical, have like so much knowledge. But I guess I've gotten to that point, and really it's not just about the technical knowledge, but it's being almost like an advocate. So being an expert elite really kind of, you are representing Autodesk, and you're showcasing the contributions to, this community that Autodesk has developed, what they call the Autodesk community, by being open, sharing your knowledge with everybody, trying to teach people not just about the software, but best practices, how to use it, providing that expertise and giving back. But also, like I said, you're representing Autodesk as an organization while not being like, once you are an employee of Autodesk, you can't be an expert elite anymore.
Sure.
So you're also kind of being an advocate for other people, and Autodesk, is really trying to push this DE&I. So helping to promote, inclusivity within the organization or adjacent to the organization, and all of those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And I mean, you mentioned that you thought it might be, unattainable or not for you because it's overly technical, but I know you've done some presentations with Autodesk. Could you talk about what that looked like? Was it before you were an expert elite? Was it after? A combination of the two?
Yeah, I think it's just like when I was younger, I just like never thought that I would get there. So, it's always about this imposter syndrome of like, oh, will I ever achieve it? But I guess, obviously with experience and age, you do get that technical knowledge. And yeah, a lot of what I did with Autodesk actually was before I became an expert elite, because I became an expert elite last year. So I haven't been one that long comparatively to a lot of other expert elites out there. But I started kind of just working with Autodesk as a passion project. Like, I wanted to be a voice. I started presenting at Autodesk University, and it wasn't actually on technical things at all. It was about being a female in the industry, what that's like, sharing my experiences and helping other women to get into the industry, or even just being there to talk to them and encourage them, or just be a listening board to hear about all the issues they're having.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I kind of started presenting and working with Autodesk in the past.
Nice.
So it had nothing to do with my technical skills.
But I think that kind of voice is really important, especially in an industry where it's so predominantly male, and especially wanting the diversity and the inclusion to continue to grow and for people to feel more comfortable. It's important to have voices like yours that are upheld by other people. Yeah, so that's awesome. So with that, how have all those experiences changed, or maybe solidified how you view the AEC industry, and how have you kind of shaped that for yourself?
So I think that all of this has really impacted me, I mean, positively in a way. I think that before working with them, I was kind of siloed, right? Like a lot of people are. Like, I was like, oh my God, am I the only one having these experiences? Am I the only one that's frustrated? Am I the only one who wants change? And starting to speak out and work with other people, work with Autodesk, has given me a lot of like courage to talk more about it, because there are other people that are so relatable that I can talk to that are having the same experiences. So I don't feel alone anymore. But also I see a lot of hope, because I'm seeing that things are happening and the change is happening. Speaking from women who are older than me, who have been in the industry for a lot longer, who have had more, right? So like they kind of paved the way for us, and hearing their stories and how, it's already improved for me and my generation. And then hopefully seeing, that continue to happen over time, so that women who are, or girls who are coming into our industry, will have easier times in the next generation, is, I'm really hopeful that that will happen. Talking out more has also brought me a lot of allies in the industry, people who, I've talked to, and they've, kind of had these like aha moments where they're like, oh, what you're saying, is true, and that is happening, and we want to help you, and we want to help other people. So I think it's given me the courage and the confidence to continue to talk about it. And it's also allowed me to um, kind of network a lot more than I have. Like I've networked so much more in the last couple of years than I have ever before, because I've gotten such positive responses from people.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I know earlier you had mentioned that you're hoping that we ask you about drawing the line that is maybe a line, but obviously that's never a line. So how have you managed to go from architect to product manager? Like, what was that line?
Yeah, the squiggly curve.
Yep.
Not really a line. But yeah, so I thought about this a lot, because at first when I was originally, people were asking me this question, I was like, oh, it's just like some luck. But I feel like that really discredited what work I put in to get me here to where I am today. So I would say there was a tiny bit of luck, but there was a lot of me also really being, or feeling a bit stagnant in what I was doing, and looking for a way to make more of an impact and make a change. I always really, I was working in like this BIM field that I did straight out of school. I never wanted to go into design. I wanted to go into technology. I love technology. So I started off doing BIM, and, slowly was really getting into coding and seeing other people developing alongside Revit and AutoCAD and other products, and being kind of like in awe of what they're doing, and really excited about the things that they are working on, and started to kind of play around with it on my own, which is how I learned Dynamo. I really wanted to get into that. And Dynamo is kind of the visual programming language for those of you who don't know. So it's a really easy way to learn or start coding or developing without the kind of textual barrier. So a lot of designers really lean towards that. And then I just started playing around on the side. So and the reason I say it's a little bit of luck is because I had really amazing leadership at my company. So at Symetri, I constantly talked to my leader and was like, hey, these are the things I'm interested in. I don't want to do what I'm doing right now for the rest of my life. I don't know what I want to do, but these are the things that I'm really interested in right now. I really like development. I really like coding. If there's an opportunity, like would you really, put me forward for that? So, that happened a few years. It took a few years for like me having those conversations, but me also working on the side to like hone my skills and learn about developing and coding and things like that, and learning Dynamo. And to the point where an opportunity finally did happen, where, it was the pandemic. So I was a consultant at the time. Consulting work kind of was a little slower. And my company decided to develop their own products. And so at that time, my leadership was like, hey, like you have a few days a week where you're not consulting. Why don't you reach out to this person? They're starting to develop products for us. Like, just see how you can help them. And it was really like, I then jumped on that opportunity. I was working overtime. I was putting in so many, I'm not recommending people do this, but at the time it was really exciting for me, and it was COVID, so I was stuck home,
Mhm.
and I just like jumped on that opportunity. Like I worked every hour of the day. I was working overtime. I would finish, clock out at whatever 5, 6 p.m. Sit and watch TV in my studio apartment at the time, and just like do the extra things that they wanted me to do, and learn the things that they wanted me to learn, and put in countless hours to learn how to be a product owner, and then get certifications. And like Jillian at the time, like it was really like bootstrap, um kind of startup mentality where
Yeah.
like we're just doing everything. I
Yeah.
was being the product owner, I was being the manager, I was being the scrum master, I was, doing the UI UX design because I was the only one with like quote design background. Like I was doing it all. And so I think it was like a lot of hard work. It was a lot of like, okay, finally seeing that this was something I'm interested in, getting all the certifications, doing all the courses, and then, eventually when they, were looking to actually build the team, I was kind of first in line to do that.
That's awesome. I feel like you've really let your passions drive where you were going to go, and you've allowed yourself to just kind of completely commit to that. Would you say that's a fair statement?
100%. Yes.
That's awesome. So you said in the middle that you wouldn't recommend other people do what you do, but I'm sure that there could be people listening who want to do something like what you would do. If you could go back and change how you did it, would you, and what would you change?
That's a great question. The only thing I always say, because I'm a big advocate for work-life balance, and I
Fair
feel
enough.
like honestly working in Germany really taught me a lot of good work-life balance, skills. So that's why I just don't recommend people putting in so much overtime, because I think everyone should have, a good work-life balance. And at the time it worked for me because I, didn't have any other obligations like a family,
Mm.
a partner. It was just me and my dog. And so if I could go back, what I would change is I would earlier, because I burnt out really quickly. For a few months, I was putting in, 80-hour work weeks, which I'm sure for a lot of people might seem normal, but I don't think that's normal. And I burnt out, and I started, going back and like having, anxiety attacks and things like that. And it finally took a while for me to approach my boss and be like, I can't do this anymore. I'm burnt out, and like I need more, because at that time I was still doing my current role, which is a was a consultant and helping out the development team. So
Mm.
and once I did that, like it was an 100% switch. He was on my side, and he helped like reallocate time and things like that. And I just wish that I, like I said, had the confidence to do that earlier and talk to the people in my organization and say, like I am working too much, and I need less, more time dedicated to this, so I don't have to put so much overtime into it. And if, you have good leadership, they will want to, they will prioritize your mental health and help you achieve those goals without jeopardizing your mental health. So keep mental health as the number one priority.
Yeah, and it's definitely key. Like, let's say you don't have great leadership. I mean, it's key to prioritize things yourself as best you can and know what your limits are and do what you need to. Because I think even if you don't have great leadership, you should always prioritize your own mental health in order to be able to, function every day. Um,
Exactly.
and if that means a bigger change, just keep working towards getting to that change that you need in order to benefit yourself. Uh, Never have to be stuck somewhere if you don't want to.
Yeah, and something that was important to me when I hit my wall of working too hard and I could no longer sustain it was realizing that everyone has a breaking point, and it doesn't make me not good at what I am good at. It just means that I need to slow down a little bit or to hit reset. So, kind of having that imposter syndrome kick in of, am I actually good at what I'm doing, or am I just putting in enough hours where I'm able to convince someone that I'm good at it? And then having to reflect that no, I'm just driving myself to a point where I can no longer function at all, was really important for me. And I urge everyone who might be listening to take account of yourself and make sure that you're doing okay, because you can't work and you can't do anything if you can't take care of yourself. So I think that's important.
Facts for sure.
Good
And
math.
Shir, I know you earlier mentioned some imposter syndrome, as Jillian just mentioned. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody has felt imposter syndrome at some point. So how has that like impacted you, and what did you do to overcome it? Or like, are you still feeling it today, or do you kind of finally feel like you're no longer that imposter?
Yeah, I think I've overcome it. There's still moments for sure. Especially when I'm, every time you start something new, I feel like every time I
Mm-hmm.
start something new, there's always that transition period. But especially so when I was transitioning from just doing like BIM consulting for architects to being a product owner, there was a huge that was the longest I've ever had imposter syndrome. It was because it was starting a whole new industry, starting a whole new job. It's like when you're an intern, right? And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of doing all the menial tasks of like, because you're just trying to learn as much as you can and you're putting in all that overtime in the beginning when you're young. But now I'm doing it like in my 30s, which is a lot harder. So how, that was where the mental health comes in. But it was
Mm-hmm.
definitely in the beginning because I was learning so much so quickly. There was such a steep learning curve because, you know, we needed to develop this product, and a lot of us on the team were new, so we all needed to know. And I was the only female on the team, so that also kind of
Wow.
added another layer. And not to say that like my team is incredible and was incredible at that time, but there's always like am I doing? There's this extra layer of concern, and it's probably not probably, but a lot of it is in my head where I'm like,
Yeah.
do I deserve to be here? Am I as good as they are? Do I know what I'm talking about? When they sound really confident, do they know what they're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also had a hurdle where I did have somebody who didn't really want me to join the team. So that added like another, like, well, why aren't I invited to the meetings? But it just was like kind of a one person, and it was resolved in the end. And so it was a lot of like overcoming the confidence in yourself because you are learning so much, and you kind of have to, not, I wouldn't say like fact check yourself a lot, but there's definitely like, okay, we're gonna try this, and is this correct? Because you're learning so much that there's so much trial and error. You just have to be open to failure, and just take it as a learning point to say, okay, like I did this, I failed, what can I learn for this, and then do better next time. So it's almost like this um up and down curve, but in the end you're constantly increasing, and by the end you're going to be in a much better place. And as long as I had to, luckily I have now an amazing husband who is my like advocate, and he's always like, when I'm having those moments where like, oh no, like, do I deserve to be here? What's going on? He's always like pulls me aside and he's like, okay, Shir, who is a bad bee, right? Who is the girl boss? You are. And then like it helps to have somebody on your side to
Yeah.
kind of bring you out of your own um thought process and show you that, okay, like you do deserve to be here. You do know sort of what you're doing in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and that you are valued.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to have somebody to point out all the good things you did just do that you're just forgetting because you're thinking of all the negative things or things you didn't get to. And they're like, well, don't you remember all these amazing things you just did? And, well, I guess you're right. Now that you mention it, I completely
Yeah.
forgot about all of that. So
Yeah.
that's definitely key to help keep you on a steer. What's it called? A flat level. Good.
And also one other thing is that I also got a mentor. And
Nice.
that mentor, and I know it's really hard to find a mentor, but I always encourage people like to get a mentor because that helped so tremendously to validate a lot of the things that I was doing, and help to like reset your mind, like you said, to the positive. Like,
Yep.
because so many of us, I know I'm guilty of this, is like focusing on the negatives and like, oh, well, this is what I did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But you also, my mentor at least helped me really focus on the positive and looking at the outcomes that are happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, with you've made this major career shift. What would you recommend to others besides what you've already recommended if they want to switch careers? Like, what would their kind of first step be?
So the first step is probably a lot of research. So reading up on kind of the different roles, the different responsibilities, because within each industry, there are different roles. So and I kind of came in and trying to understand, software development and the different roles between, a product owner versus a product manager versus scrum master versus a developer, and like what each role does and what I would like to do. And that also took took some time to figure out, like, then there was a crossroads, where I kind of had to decide, well, do I want to continue to be a product owner or do I want to be a product manager? And that was, a period of time because they are different. One works with more the development, one works with more like the customers. And I ended up, obviously choosing to be a product manager at this time. So I think like understanding that, getting all your certifications and just being open to learning so much so quickly, being able to, and this is hard for, I'm sure, a lot of people, but saying, I don't know, and that's okay because you are, in a transition. So it's okay to not know things and ask a lot of questions. Just continuously ask questions. Look online, find people in the industry, in this new industry, ask them lots of questions. And because a lot of people are open to sharing and helping and all those things.
Yeah. And then for women who want to enter the AEC industry, what kind of recommendations do you have for them? Like, are you aware of any groups that people could be involved in? Any other females in the industry that they could reach out to?
So I am part of the Women in BIM program or organization, and that is a great place to meet people. They have a mentorship program that I'm also a part of, and they have meetups and things like that. There's also the Autodesk forums, different Autodesk groups. There's a lot of LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups that you can join. And I would say that if you are a woman, just, know that there are, the industry is growing in terms of the percentage of women going into the industry. But there's also a lot of allies in the industry. So meaning there's a lot of men who are supporting women, who want to see women grow. And so find the other women in the industry who can help you, but also know that there are other allies, and that you're not going to be alone.
Yeah, that's super important to remember, and especially like we were joking at some of the events I've been to, like, oh, there's a line for the men's bathroom and not for the women's bathroom. But
that is quite nice.
Yeah, it's one of the perks. But it is important 100%. To know that you're welcomed there. And if you have a bad experience with, a singular person, know that it's not you, it's them and their inability to change and adapt. So really taking that to mind and making sure that you're confident in yourself with what we were just talking about as well. So with that, we are going to have Shir on our next episode as well.
Indeed.
And so we're going to get to talk to Shir a lot more about some additional topics, including some more about our diversity and inclusion experiences and personal branding as well. So Caitlin, unless you have anything else to add to this particular episode.
Or Shir, if there's anything else you want to share with everybody on this topic of kind of entering the AEC industry and being a woman in the industry.
Just don't be afraid to fail and take risks, and you can do it.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, then I'm going to wrap up this episode and we'll get going. So once again, thank you, Shir, for being here today and talking with us. I feel like it was a great episode. We got a lot of great nuggets of wisdom, so I greatly appreciate that. And thank you, listeners, for your time today. Make sure you like and subscribe to get notified on our latest episodes. We are now on Spotify. I'm very excited. So many people are excited. I'm sure Shir is excited because she asked us if we were on Spotify, and now we are. So that's great. And if you've listened to a few and have enjoyed our episodes, please be sure to rate us or leave us a comment to let us know what you'd like to hear about or what we can improve, and give us a share. We make this for you. We make this for everybody. So if anybody you think could be interested in the content that we're talking about, please give us a share. And so with that, we'll catch you next time.